Hey Steno peeps, Jen back with a brand new jury charge dictation. Today we're going to do a jury charge centered around the movie Fractured. This is one of my favorite movies with Anthony Hopkins and Ryan Gosling. If you haven't seen it, it's a must, but this is going to be at no particular speed, so let's dive in. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have now heard the evidence in this case before you. It is your solemn duty to carefully consider the facts and render a verdict based on the law. The facts of this case are complex, and I ask that you keep an open mind as you deliberate. The defendant, Ray Monroe, is charged with the murder of his wife, Steph Monroe, in what is alleged to have been a deliberate act of violence. The prosecution asserts that Ray intentionally shot and killed his wife, while the defense contends that the shooting was a tragic accident influenced by the chaotic circumstances surrounding the incident. I will now instruct you on the law that applies to this case. On the night of December 10th, the Monroe family was caught in a violent confrontation. According to the prosecution, Ray Monroe and his wife, Steph, were engaged in a heated argument. During this argument, Ray allegedly retrieved a gun and shot his wife. The prosecution further argues that Ray's motive for this act was his suspicion of his wife's infidelity, as she was involved in an extramarital affair with Detective Paul Turner, a hostage negotiator. The defense has raised argument that Ray Monroe was not the only one who shot his wife. They assert that a gun swap took place during the chaotic events of that night, which was orchestrated by Detective Turner. The defendant claims that Detective Turner, who had been having an affair with his wife, switched guns with him, leading to Steph's death at the hands of the detective. Detective Turner's actions are at the heart of the defense's argument. You will need to carefully consider the testimony about the events involving the hostage negotiation, the gun swap, and the possibility that Turner could have had access to the weapon used in the shooting. The defense suggests that Turner's involvement in the situation was not merely passive. They argue that Turner had a motive to frame Ray Monroe by switching the guns, thus leaving Ray with no opportunity to defend himself. The prosecution argues that Ray Monroe's motive was driven by his discovery of his wife's affair with Detective Turner. The affair is presented as a catalyst that led to the violent confrontation. On the other hand, the defense presents Ray as a man whose emotions were manipulated by the stress of the situation, with the real responsibility for his wife's death lying in the hands of Detective Turner. As you deliberate, you must consider whether Ray Monroe intended to kill his wife or whether the shooting was accidental. If you find that the shooting was accidental, you may find Ray guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but not murder. If, however, you find that Ray acted with specific intent to kill his wife, you may convict him of first-degree murder. You must also consider whether the alleged gun swap and the potential involvement of Detective Turner undermines the credibility of the prosecution's case. The defense asks you to find that Ray was unaware of the gun swap and that he was in a state of emotional distress due to the confrontation with his wife and her affair. If you believe that Ray did not intend to harm his wife but acted recklessly or out of confusion, you may consider the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. If the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ray Monroe deliberately shot and killed his wife, if you, as jurors, have any reasonable doubt as to the truth of the prosecution's versions of events, you must acquit the defendant. If, however, you are convinced by the evidence that Ray Monroe intentionally took his wife's life, you may convict him as charged. Finally, you must consider the role of Detective Turner in these events. He has not been formally charged in this case, but the evidence suggests that his actions, including the gun switch, may have influenced the course of events. Although you are not to find Turner guilty or responsible for the crime at hand, you may consider his actions when determining whether Ray Monroe was the person who ultimately fired the fatal shot. All right, that wasn't exactly how it went down, which I'm kind of glad because I didn't want to spoil it for you. It's definitely a little different than how this is portraying that movie to be. So if you have not seen Fractured, it's actually a good one to really sit down and just write on with your machine. I encourage you to do that. So be sure to keep practicing, and I will catch you on the next dictation.